Hi, everyone. Hope you've had a great week. We're going to read chapter 3 of The Secret of the Golden Pavilion. Chapter 3 Strange Symbols. Mr. Drew's eyes were twinkling. This sounds like a Hawaiian house party, he remarked. Seriously, I'm glad the boys will be there to help solve the mystery. There are a few angles to this case that worry me, and I'll feel better with a crowd of you at Kalakula. I'll call Bess and George right away, said Nancy. Suppose I make it on the outside phone, Dad. See you. She gave him a quick kiss and left. From his secretary's desk, Nancy calls first Bess, then George. No one answered at either of their homes. Nancy, eager to share her secret and hopeful that her friends could make the trip, was disappointed. Oh, well, I'll try later, she said to herself. The young sleuth decided to start work on the case immediately. First, she went to the library to see if she could learn from reference books. The meaning of the Polynesian symbols which Nico Sakamaki had sent to his grandson. The reference library was very helpful, but neither she nor Nancy could find the answer to the riddle. I'm sorry, said Miss Taylor, who knew the young detective well. I suppose you're working on another mystery. Perhaps I can help you. Something just occurred to me. I believe I know a very person who might be able to tell you what the symbols mean. He's Professor Wharton. I understand he speaks many languages and is an authority on hieroglyphics and other forms of ancient writing. Nancy smiled. That's wonderful. I'd like to talk to him. Where does he live? Just a minute, Miss Taylor replied. She opened a drawer of her desk and looked through a stack of cards. Presently, she pulled out one. Here it is. He lives in the newly developed section of River Heights called Elwyn Estates. I'm sorry, I don't have the name of the street. I'll be able to find him, Nancy said, eager to start. Thank you very much for everything, Miss Taylor. The young sleuth hurried home to get her convertible, then drove out to Elwyn Estates. At the entrance were large stone pillars with a small office to one side. She inquired where Professor Wharton lived and was given directions to Hilltop Road. Among that, the elderly man would be at home. She hurried to his house, parked the car, and went up to the front walk. She lifted a huge knocker on the front door. After a moment, the door was opened by a tall, frail-looking man with brilliant blue eyes and a shock of white hair. Professor Wharton? Nancy inquired. The man nodded and asked her to come in. As Nancy introduced herself and told why she was there, Miss Wharton came forward and was introduced. I am very much interested in trying to help you, the professor said, as Nancy opened her purse and handed him the piece of paper bearing the symbols which Mr. Sakamaki had given her. Ah, yes, the professor murmured. Mrs. Wharton asked Nancy to be seated, and her husband excused himself to his study. He was gone only a few moments. I have your answer, he said, smiling. These are ancient Polynesian symbols, to be sure. The first one means water, and the second one sleep or death. Water and sleep or death, Nancy repeated thoughtfully. This is a wonderful help to me. Thank you very much, Professor Wharton. Nancy was so excited by what she had learned that she decided to stop at her father's office and tell him about the meaning of the symbols. To her delight, Mr. Sakamaki was there. Mr. Drew looked at his daughter intently, then broke into a chuckle. Mr. Sakamaki, I can tell you right now that Nancy has already solved one part of our mystery. So soon? The islander asked unbelievingly. Nancy told the two men how she had learned the meaning of the Polynesian symbols. Have you any idea, Mr. Sakamaki, what your grandfather could have meant by water and sleep or death? She asked. Mr. Sakamaki shook his head. I can only make a guess. Since grandfather told me not to sell Kalakula before I learned its mystery, I would say that perhaps he meant the golden pavilion contains the secret because it is near the water. As to the sleep or death symbol, I have no idea. Is it possible, Nancy asked, that someone who was dear to your grandfather sleeps in death beneath the pavilion? After a few moments of thoughtful silence, Mr. Sakamaki said that he was sure such was not the case. Then he changed the subject of conversation. I came here to tell your father that I have just had an airmail letter from the caretaker, Kiabu. It said the night before at dusk a mysterious native dancing girl had appeared in the pavilion. Kiabu claimed that she looked like a ghost dancer. He and his wife sneaked up on the figure with the thought of questioning her. But just before they reached the pavilion, she seemed to vanish into nothingness, and that frightened them. A ghost! Nancy cried out excitedly. One could come to that conclusion, Mr. Sakamaki replied, but I have a theory that some person or persons may have cleverly rigged up a contrivance to make it appear as if the ghost were dancing in the pavilion. But why should anyone go to all that trouble? Nancy asked. The Hawaiian could give no explanation. He wondered whether he might have some enemies who had in some way heard of Kalakula's secret and were trying to learn what it was. They probably figured it to be a great treasure. Nancy, the man said earnestly, you may be running into plenty of pilaka. Pilaka? Nancy questioned. That means trouble, Mr. Sakamaki told her. I'm not taking back my invitation, but I did not realize there might be so much pilaka. I believe you should think over the whole matter carefully before you decide to go. Instead of discouraging me, your latest news makes me want to tackle the mystery of Kalakula all the more. The Hawaiian smiled. I was hoping you would say that, he told her. A moment later, he arose to leave. My very best wishes to you and all your party, he said. After Mr. Sakamaki had left, Nancy once more telephoned Bess and George. This time she found both of them at home and asked the two girls to come to the Drew house immediately. Big adventure coming up, she told the cousins. We promise to hurry over. They arrived at the Drew home at the same time Nancy did. Bess, blonde and slightly plump, dimpled as she smiled. Is this adventure just for fun, or is it going to be full of hair-raising episodes like the other mysteries we've worked on together? Whatever it is, I'm ready for something different, George remarked. She was tall and slender and wore her dark hair in a short, casual cut. George, in contrast to her timid cousin Bess, was matter-of-fact and practical. As soon as the girls entered the house, Nancy asked Hannah to come into the living room. After the four sat down, the young sleuth told about the proposed Hawaiian trip. Dreamy, exclaimed Bess, but it does sound dangerous. Hypers, I can hardly wait to go, George remarked. I hope our parents will let us. Hannah Gruen wore a broad, contented smile. Nancy, she said, this is one time I can keep an eye on you while you're working on a mystery. The three girls laughed, but Hannah's face suddenly clouded. I don't know, though, whether it's safe to go out to that Pacific island. They have volcanoes out there that are apt to start up at any minute. Then their food is so different. Hannah, dear, said Nancy, it's high time you learned our newest state of Hawaii. It is one of the most up-to-date places in the world and one of the most beautiful. I can tell you a few facts about Hawaii, George spoke up. There are 7 main islands on which people live. Honolulu is the capital, and it's on Oahu. The population is made up mainly of pure Hawaiians, part Hawaiians, Caucasians, and Orientals. The most handsome people in the world live there. Bess made a wry face at her cousin. Well, you certainly have been reading up on that, she gibed. And now I'm going to call home and get permission to go. Her parents gladly consented. Then George phoned her mother and father. She, too, was told she might take the trip. As George announced this to the others, Bess suddenly gave a little squeal. Girls, the boys are going out to Hawaii, remember? That's right, said George. Nancy said she would put in a call at once to Emerson College and talk to Ned, since his plane was leaving that night. When Ned heard that the girls were going to Hawaii, he gave a loud whoop. Nancy, this is the most wonderful news of the day. We fellows are leaving here in a little while. We're going first to California and then fly out from there. As soon as you girls arrive, we'll come to Kalakula. In the meantime, you'll find our gang at the Halakaluni Hotel. That's on Waikiki Beach, isn't it? Nancy asked. Yes, it is. And get there as fast as you can. After a few more minutes of conversation in which Ned promised he would pass along the good word to Bert and Dave, he and Nancy said goodbye. Then she turned to Hannah Gruen and the girls. Dad will get our reservations, she said. He may pick up something in a hurry, so you'd better start packing. Bess and George left at once to get started on their packing. Nancy and Hannah began looking over their own clothes for the trip. During breakfast the next morning, the telephone rang. Nancy answered it and learned to her surprise the caller was the window washer, Abe, at Hancock. "I have an important message for you, miss," he said. "I don't want to give it to you on the phone, 'cause somebody may be listening. I'll be washing windows at 37 Maple Street. Can you come over there and talk to me?" Nancy promised to meet him in a short while. Eager to learn what Abe had to tell her, she finished her breakfast quickly and started out. On the way, she met George, who was going downtown to buy a new bathing suit. "Please come with me first," Nancy asked, and told her about Abe's message. "All right," George agreed. The two girls reached 37 Maple Street in 10 minutes. As they approached the side of the house, closely planted with high bushes, they saw a ladder that extended to the second floor. Abe was at the top of it, busily washing a window. As Nancy was about to call to him, the ladder began to sway. The next moment, it was yanked away from the house. Abe Antock, meanwhile, had grabbed for the windowsill and now clung to it desperately, his legs hanging in mid-air. "Help!" he screeched. At that moment, Nancy spotted a man lurking among the bushes. He was holding onto the ladder. Suddenly, he let it drop and dashed off through the backyard.